This Late Night Linux Family podcast is made possible by our patrons. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can join them. Support us on Patreon for access to ad-free episodes and early releases. That's latenightlinux.com/support. Hello and welcome to episode 146 of Linux Dev Time. I'm Joe.
I'm Monolith.
I'm Kevin.
And I'm Andy.
Good to talk to you all again. Before we get going, I just want to plug a meetup that we're going to have. This is going to be on Saturday, the 27th of June from 6 p.m. until late. And it's going to be at the Shipwrights Arms pub, which is right next to London Bridge Station in London. I'm hoping you're going to be there, Andy.
I am.
Excellent. So put it in your calendar, 27th of June. If you're in or around London, come along. Nothing formal, just having a few drinks at the pub, having a chat, that sort of thing. 27th of June. Is Matrix really that bad? This has come up a lot recently with the Discord age gating business and people looking for alternatives. And I know you work on Matrix, Andy, so we should definitely caveat it with this. But is it that bad? I think, yes, the UX is not great. But what did the other two of you think about it?
It really depends on what we mean by, is it that bad? I don't use Matrix super heavily, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. From the outside, though, like, when I do use it and when I have used it, like, yeah, the UX is a little bit clunky. There have been some previous, like, security reports back in the past on, like, some interesting decisions, I guess, on the protocols and things. So, like, from the outside, I've always thought of it as kind of like, oh, it's not fully there yet. But I also wonder if jumping into it more heavily, like if I would either A, uncover more things that I would find issues, or if I would just be like, this is fine. This is like every other chat app. Because I actually can't name a single chat app that I think is excellent in all categories. So I have mixed opinions.
That's funny. All except one or two, Telegram is excellent. The only things I don't like are the security of it all, but I just treat it like I'm talking in the pub. I would never say anything too private on there. And the crypto stuff and some of the monetization stuff, the paywalling of certain reactions and everything. But the general UI and UX of Telegram is excellent, I think. And that's why I think I've stuck with it so long. And I want to be clear, when I say the UX of Matrix is a disaster, I don't mean the UI. The UI of the various apps is fine. It's just a chat app. I'm talking about the user experience. The experience of failed to decrypt message and trying to move between devices, that sort of thing. That's what I find to be disastrous as a user.
I would actually be interested for Andy to correct me if I'm wrong here, but Matrix has had a, not a security first principle, but definitely like security up there principle. If not first, then, very, very near behind. And all of those details that make something secure impede the UX of something. Like, you can't have something that is has the perfect UX with any kind of reasonable security, or at least in my opinion, you can't. There's always going to be trade-offs there. And I think, at least in my experience from the Matrix case, like they have tried to address that by prioritizing security over UX, which some agree with, right? That's a reasonable take and a reasonable opinion to have. And it feels like there have been spots where there could be additional polish that could be applied, but I agree. Like, I've had problems with like logging into an account or an old account, and like you can't prove that you're you any longer, or like joining a group room or other people joining. Like, there's all kinds of weird things, but these are all, I don't think they're like Matrix specific problems. I think they are secure chat app problems that are difficult to solve anywhere. Like, Signal doesn't even get these right, I would say, a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have a slightly different take on that. So I do think that there are sometimes trade-offs between security and user experience. But I think most of the problems that people experience with Matrix, it's a reflection of the fact that it's hard to have good user experience and security. It's not a reflection of the fact that it's impossible. So the way Matrix has been built, it's got a lot of technically very useful and important features, but it's been hard to pull that together into a really excellent user experience. And I think that my job is basically to fix all the things that Joe said, and we're slowly chipping away at that stuff.
Yeah, you're doing a really good job of it, Andy.
Thank you very much. I will say, I feel really frustrated that so much of it is still so difficult, and I totally acknowledge that. I will say the number of unable to decrypt messages is massively down on what it was. Certainly 2 years ago, maybe even 1 year ago. We have like statistics that track this, but also when I said that at the Matrix conference the other day, no one like booed me. So I'm pretty sure it's true.
If that was an officially tracked statistic, like number of boos on the thing, that would be hilarious. You should definitely do that, Andy.
But yeah, I think it's really difficult to make something that's properly secure and has a really excellent experience. But I just don't think it's impossible. So things like the difficulty of moving to another device, like if you've actually forgotten your recovery key and you've got no way of verifying your new device, verifying it's really you, then you are going to lose your cryptographic identity and you're going to lose access to your old messages. But it doesn't have to be a horrific user experience. We just have to clearly explain to you, you lost your things, so you've lost access to your messages, they're encrypted, sorry. It doesn't have to be agony like it can be where people get stuck in a loop and they can't actually get into the app.
I've always wondered if this is like a kind of a dichotomy in the way that people think about things and the way programmers build things. So what I mean by that is like when you talk to people building secure chat apps, they think in terms of like the device and the thing communicating through the device, which is, I would say, typically a human. And we think in terms of like, it's me, no matter what device I go to, like it's me. And how can you prove that someone is that same person on multiple devices, or if it is a new person on device? There's all kinds of complications that come in when you start talking about secure communications. Whereas like from the human standpoint, especially if you're in the like non-nerd category and don't care about these things, then it can be somewhat jarring when you go to a new device, you try to sign in, and all of a sudden you have no messages. It might be perfectly explainable to say, well, you had a cryptographic identity and you no longer have access to that, therefore we can no longer decrypt your previous messages. But to like a normie, that is probably going to be like, what? Like, I just want secure messengers and I want to be able to see my old things. Well, those two ideas are somewhat in challenge with each other. And there might, and I agree with you, Andy, like there are things that I think could be done so that it is not impossible to have a good user experience. But I do think you have to make a priority choice. And when you prioritize security over user experience, like these are that is what happens. And I don't even think that that's a wrong decision to make.
There are choices that the Matrix ecosystem has made. So for example, with WhatsApp, you basically don't get message history, right? Whereas in Matrix, we provide it. And in WhatsApp, you also don't get a proper sense of cryptographic identity. You could just be speaking to someone else and you probably wouldn't notice. So in Matrix, we have those features, but then we probably have a load of users who don't care. So maybe it should be a smoother experience for people to just be able to say, I don't care about this in principle end-to-end encryption stuff so much, and allow some level of opting out of that, or just making it a smoother experience when you, like, for example, if you don't have any message history, maybe we should just show you no messages instead of showing you a whole list of things that say you can't decrypt this message.
What about the ongoing costs that Matrix has and the fact that as a project, it's pretty much broke? I know this is going to be pretty awkward for you to talk about, Andy, but Amalith, you have told me before that like running the home server costs just a ridiculous amount of money.
I don't remember any of the numbers, and I don't know whether the numbers I saw were valid because it was a text file on a web server. At the time, the Matrix home server was using something like many terabytes of storage for the database, and that blew my mind because that's a lot of storage. And the Matrix protocol itself makes that a hard problem to deal with because, from what I understand, and maybe this has changed, I looked into it a long time ago, it relies on the room and all of the events in the room composing a directed acyclic graph. And in a directed acyclic graph, there is a root node, and then children nodes are created from that root node, and the child nodes contain the hash of the parent node. And then grandchild nodes, if you will, are created from those children, and they contain the hash of their parents. So from the furthest descendant, you can walk up the graph and cryptographically verify through the hashes and signatures that everything, all of the events were sent by the key, that nothing was changed, all of it's immutable. There are lots of very good guarantees provided by a directed acyclic graph, and Git itself is a directed acyclic graph. When you're working in a Git repository and running Git commands, you are manipulating a graph that is similar to the one that is a room in Matrix.
Yeah, it's a similar model to Git, yeah.
Let's imagine you are self-hosting your server. You are not using matrix.org, you're somewhere else. On your server, you have some rooms. They live on your server. That all makes sense. When you join a room hosted by another server, that server transfers, as far as I understand, the entirety of that directed acyclic graph to your local server. So there are now 2 copies of that room, one on the remote server and one on yours. And if you scale this out across a bunch of rooms with potentially thousands of participants sending hundreds of messages a day, hundreds of rooms, thousands of rooms, that duplication adds up incredibly quickly. And I wasn't willing to pay the storage cost of participating in Matrix at the time. So I stopped running my home server.
Okay, so let me try and pull a few things apart there. So first of all, let's take your point about needing to replicate the graph. So it's actually not the case that you have to replicate the full graph.
Is this sliding sync?
No. Just
okay.
as part of the protocol, you don't have to replicate the full graph. But I think quite a bit of your point stands because you do need to replicate a reasonable amount of information. You need to replicate the information about the state of the room, so like who's in it and whether people have been banned and stuff like that. So that can get quite large. But on the point of what type of protocol is Matrix, right, especially if we compare it with XMPP, Matrix is a protocol that synchronizes like a database of information across multiple servers. That's the sense in which it federates. Whereas with XMPP, it's about passing messages from server to server. Now, obviously, then some features in XMPP allow you to store messages, so it's not as simple as that. But that's the way of contrasting those 2 chat protocols or protocols that can be used for chat. So yeah, Matrix is about synchronizing like a database of information across multiple things. So it does require large amounts of storage potentially.
To go a little bit further on how Jabber works, the conversation history is stored on the user's server if it's a one-on-one conversation. If it's a multi-user conversation, that history is stored on whichever server the creating user decided to put it on. Jabber's is a bit piecemeal in that you can do things like I'm on my server, but I'm allowed to create a multi-user chat on another server that anyone anywhere can join. And in that model, if the server hosting that room goes down, the room is inaccessible to other participants, while in the Matrix model, because everyone has their own copy on their server, the room does not appear to go down, quote unquote.
Exactly, yeah. So there are different models that have different advantages and disadvantages. And yeah, Matrix is designed to be fully robust to lots of servers being involved. And then if any of those servers go away, the ones that remain can continue running that room without anyone noticing, apart from the fact that you lose the users on the servers that went away. And that has advantages and disadvantages. Just on the points about like the amount of storage and resources that you need to run a Matrix server, it's non-trivial, and I imagine it's more than some other chat protocols. But you can set retention limits and things like that on servers. So actually you can reduce the amount of storage. One of the things that maybe slightly skews this debate is that on the matrix.org server, the biggest instance that people use, the Foundation has decided not to set any limits whatsoever. So every single message that's ever been sent on matrix.org is still there. Every single image that's been uploaded is still there. And that's a choice by the crazy people at the Matrix Foundation. Not necessarily a choice that everyone has to make.
All sitting there waiting to be decrypted.
It's all encrypted with strong encryption, but it's not post-quantum right now.
Being able to set a retention period is good. I didn't realize you could do that.
You can do that, but it's still true that if you join a very busy room, then a server that was previously running reasonably well with low resources will then start using a lot more resources. And that's something that is not necessarily a desirable feature for a server administrator, right? That one of their users decides to join a busy room and suddenly the resource usage of that whole server goes up. And that's a feature of the style of protocol that Matrix is, which is about synchronizing a database across multiple servers. You could certainly work around it or like protect from it by adding some kind of restriction about what type of room people can join. And I don't think that's a feature that's available, but you could certainly imagine that helping with that.
This all reminds me of the Fediverse. And it feels like a similar problem. Like you can have a small server, but then if you follow a bunch of people on a load of other servers, then suddenly your server has to download just shitloads of stuff and it just fills up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. This sounds more like a federation problem specific to all of these different applications, not really just a matrix.
It is a federation problem, and it's a feature of Matrix's thing that it holds all the messages for you so that you can get them later. But I also think that it, a bit like the kind of UX bugs, are kind of a mixture of fundamental to the problem and actually you can do a lot better. I feel the same about this, right? Actually, if we work hard on the servers, we can make them more efficient. We can make the storage take up a lot less space. Also, features are currently being worked on in the protocol to do something called finality, which will mean that you can kind of declare that a room at a particular time has a particular state and everyone agrees. And that allows servers to compact the information about the time before that, which can make things a lot more efficient as well. So there's like work in progress to make this stuff better, but there's no doubt that like running a Matrix server isn't as pleasant as you would like it to be. It is, however, pretty pleasant these days. There's a ESS community, which is a Helm chart, which will fire up a Matrix server. My friend did it the other day, and it basically works straight out of the box. So it's quite a lot more pleasant than it was a few years ago. Now, there's still possibility of that resource problem, like we talked about.
Did you just say Kubernetes and pleasant in the same sentence?
I mean, apparently I can't stand Kubernetes, but apparently it's really good.
And I should say Jabber's UX story around communities is not great. When the Discord news came out in our little co-op work group, we said, damn, that is literally where Jabber's story is the weakest. We have nothing good in the community chat area. We're working on trying to get it fixed. It is on our roadmap, but we feel there are more core things to get right first. And then community chat on top of that will be better.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because I do think different chat apps are good for different jobs. And one of the things that Matrix has done from quite early on is public rooms that are useful for like a community. And then there's been a lot of problems with spam, probably because that area has to deal with spam. There's been some big steps forward on spam recently after some really nasty attacks on some of the public Matrix rooms. There's a new thing called policy servers, which are so far making that problem a lot better than it was before.
Well, we did an experiment with Signal to try and replace the Late Night Linux Telegram group. And it was just a disaster. The moderation tools are just not there. Signal is not meant for public groups, essentially.
Yeah, whereas there are moderation tools for Matrix, they're not always as good as everyone would want, and probably Discord leads the pack in terms of how to do moderation. I don't know, I haven't really used it. But there are decent tools for moderation in Matrix, and they're getting better all the time.
Right. You also need to add Nitro, whatever that is, to Matrix.
Yeah. I think you're making a valuable point there, Joe, right? Like, Matrix is not owned by an evil corporation. It's not owned by anyone. It's an open standard. It's looked after by a not-for-profit foundation. And one of the attractions for people like customers of Element is that it's not owned by a single entity. There's other companies who will do all the things that Element can do for you, so you don't have to deal with Element at all. Element is the people who founded Matrix that I work for.
Is this just a problem with computer science? Is this like the third problem? Insofar as you will always have this slider between security and convenience. And you could argue that privacy and security are kind of at one end of that slider. And so you will never, ever be able to get something that is as convenient as a Telegram or a WhatsApp that is also really secure and really private.
I think there is that slider, but I think we should really push it a lot harder to, can we produce something that is both usable and secure and private? I don't think we can get all the way, but we can get a lot further than we have so far.
I think there's also, like, part of that slider is not necessarily is it secure or is it not. I guess rather further defining the threat model that you care about is what makes, in my opinion, a larger determining factor on the usability and the UX. And saying, like, I can never trust the server or anyone else on the network, to include the people I'm talking about, like, those are much harder problems to solve and also get all of the nice usability features. But I think it's entirely possible to get a very secure messenger with a lot of usability features. And I think that's what Andy's saying as well, is like we can really push those bounds, but there are probably a few things that, like, the very the very hardcore security people would say like, if it doesn't do this, then it's not a secure messenger. It doesn't qualify in my book. But I would say if you can get 95% of it as low-hanging fruit and still get all of your like sticker packs and emojis and all the other stuff that people actually like in chat apps, then like you can almost have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I mean, we already have features in Matrix that most hardcore people will say make it insecure, right? So the fact that you can access past messages on a new device because we store an encrypted copy of the keys to decrypt those messages, and then you can download it and decrypt it if you have the right key. Some people will say, well, that means it's not fully secure. It doesn't meet certain requirements. And actually, that's an optional feature, which kind of makes the point I would like to make, which is I think we can do better with guiding users to be able to say what do they think personally the right model for them is, and making it nice and easy based on those preferences.
I definitely agree the user should be able to express some kind of preference around that. With the various end-to-end encryption methods for Jabber, Omemo being the main one, the primary knob you have to turn is on or off. I like being able to turn it off because I don't always need it, but I definitely think there should be levels in between on and off. There should be some maximal level, some minimal level, maybe some things in between, or checkboxes, but then at the same time, maybe you risk complicating the UI too much and the user will tap the wrong thing. And I don't know. It's hard. I think we can do better, but yeah, it's hard.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult. We're debating right now the default, which I don't think is going to change on the Element clients, at least. Now, it's different in different clients, right? That's one the joy of the fact that there's lots of implementations of clients. But the default on the Element clients is you do that key backup thing. So if you log into a new device, you can see your old messages. But then you don't automatically set up recovery, which means that if you lose all your devices, you can still get back your history and your identity. But it nags you to set up recovery because it's a bit of a hassle, so we don't force you to do it straight away. But yeah, all that stuff, making it optional, making it easy for a user to become more secure over time once they understand a bit more of the ideas, we could make it so much better. And we are making it better, but it's painful, agonizing work. My job is really cool and exciting because I'm working on a proper, important open source project. But boy, is it agony that it takes so long to make progress. But we are slowly making progress.
I've heard it also becomes like astronomically harder when you talk about group secure messaging. Like end-to-end encrypted messages between people is already somewhat difficult. I'm not a cryptographer by any chance, but doing that in a group while also maintaining both user experience and efficiency is orders of magnitude harder, because just as a simple example, instead of, there's 4 of us talking right now, in one way to do an end-to-end encrypted message is I write out a message and I have to encrypt that same message 3 different times and send that same message 3 different ways over the wire to get to each one of the participants. Like, that's a ton more bandwidth, a ton more processing. There's all kinds of things that go into this. And then what happens if I change keys or lose keys or get a device? Like, there's all kinds of things that just become so much harder when you're talking about multiple people into a group. And then there's all kinds of stuff about like, what happens when someone joins a group? Does everybody need to approve of this? Like, there's just all kinds of problems that happen when you talk about group encrypted messaging specifically.
Yeah. It's making that secure and efficient is really challenging. Yeah. By the way, all this stuff, the way Matrix does all this stuff is all totally open and documented with the Ohm and the Mega Ohm protocols. There's lots of independent implementations of it you can read to figure out whether you like the security properties of it and so on and so on. I feel like I need to make a bit of a public service announcement, by the way, since we talked about the age verification stuff. So it is the case that being located in the UK and having UK users, the matrix.org server is going to be complying with age verification regulations in some way. We presume that it will be in a non-evil way, but it's definitely going to come. So in one way, Matrix does offer you a way out from that age verification because you can run your own server or go with someone else's server that isn't using age verification, but matrix.org is subject to that regulation.
Well, I feel like we could talk about this all day, but we should probably wrap it up. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, but until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Amalith.
I've been Kevin.
And I've been Andy.
See you later.